Welcome to the Bleed Oil Blue podcast. This is episode number 8, and I am thrilled to have a legend. He has been in the business for over 40 years covering sports. He is an Emmy Award winner. He's covered the World Series, the Super Bowl, and NASCAR races. He has interviewed sports icons, Tom Brady, Derek Jeter, Muhammad Ali. And here he is, the legend himself. Hello, Chris Myers. How are you?
Well, thank you. It's nice of you to say that. You're a legend. It means you've been around a while, from a decade at ESPN to 20 plus at Fox. It's fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. I've covered a lot of unique events, and you mentioned some of the star athletes and moments that we've been in and around. Thank you. Glad to, and still active calling games for Fox, the NFL, and some studio baseball as well. And I did, by the way, I do have not to self promote, but a book called That Deserves a Wow, which it's on Amazon. You can order, or you can get the audio. The audio book is doing well. I don't know if people read anymore. I certainly don't read as many books as I should. Everything's quick and informative, but we can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
And the audiobook, did you voice it?
Yes, I ended up voicing it. Yeah, the only thing is Bill Murray, who wrote the foreword for the book, that Bill Murray, who I became friends with from the ESPYs back in the '90s, and there's some great stories, serious and funny, with him. Get to know him a little bit through this. He wrote the foreword for the book, and so I I did the voice, and they didn't want me to do the foreword because he wrote the foreword, which was crazy Bill Murray, and they couldn't get him to do it in time, so they had some other guy, I guess a voice actor, somebody try to sound like Bill Murray, and it didn't quite didn't quite match up. But if you have to picture Bill Murray instead of listening to the voice when you read it or hear it.
Okay, let's start. How are you so busy? I see you on baseball, NASCAR, and like you said, NFL is coming and you're ready. How's your summer? Do you ever take any time off?
Yeah, I do get breaks because of the schedule. Fox does NASCAR and IndyCar, the Indy 500, which is a great addition to our coverage, along with the Daytona 500. But our NASCAR season at Fox stops a little bit at the end of May, June, and then that's kind of some downtime. And I do some studio baseball, so that's not traveling. That goes through most of the summer. Kevin Burkhardt and I split that. Then the preseason, do some preseason football, and then the NFL assignment, work with Mark Schlereth, the three-time Super Bowl champ, former Bronco, and member of back then the Washington Redskins. And then that cycles through. And then in January, I get a little bit of a break. I used to do more playoff and Super Bowl coverage. Fox does not have the Super Bowl this year. It rotates now, it seems like every 3 or 4 years, because of the
Mhm.
involvement in other broadcast entities. So there's opportunities. But I got to tell you, I enjoy the work. There are still great opportunities. There are still things that I'm learning, and believe it or not, after all these years in the business, you can bank on experience, but you gotta keep up and stay. And the fan in me pushes that, and that's why year round I would kind of be watching baseball, football. It's like when one thing stops another, and when they override each other, you pick the more interesting matchups or games or people that you're interested in. So I would be doing that anyway if I had another job, which would be hard to do that job and try to follow sport. But that's how I kind of grew up, fanatical about that. Before we had, by the way, things like this show and the kind of social media to get instant information and videos and
Mhm.
watch, your players and hear from your teams directly, which I think is great for sports fans. And you could see the popularity not only of sports, but the revenue producing, the outstanding ratings that they get, et cetera, et cetera.
So you're a super fan. So how cool is it? I know you're working, but I saw you interview Tom Brady after he came back against Atlanta and you pushed some people out of the way, which was awesome. And then you interviewed Andy Reid, the other Super Bowl champion when they won. How cool is that? Or you just focused on interviewing and then after you like take it in, you're like, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, you do, and I gotta tell you, there were stages of that when I was first got into the business, but now I gotta really compartmentalize. I mean, I will tell you, every time the anthem plays before a hockey game, a football game, especially a big Super Bowl, World Series, I get a little emotional, not only about the moment and the magnitude of the event, the freedom of the country to enjoy sports like we do, our countries. But it just, that's where I get out. Like, this is great to be here. I still get excited. I say, I can't believe I'm here. I am here, and then I got to click into this job, and I got to be really focused about whether all the preparation. I back up things in case things happen that you don't expect, which has happened often in sports, having covered some news events where we started out for sports, like the earthquake at the World Series with the A's and the Giants in 1989, and Dale Earnhardt dying at the Daytona 500 in a crash. I mean, those are things that go far beyond what you prepare for in your job, whether you're a reporter doing the pre-race show or doing the post-race show or doing play-by-play. So it's funny. I had to work myself through that. It never goes away. As a teenager, I think I was broken in. One of my first interviews was face to face with the tape recorder when I was in high school at age 16, interviewing Muhammad Ali in Miami Beach. After I left my humanities class in high school, I was helping out a radio station behind the scenes, and they got me a tape recorder. I said, "Yeah, reporter, can you run over there, ask a few questions after the press conference so that we can get it? We'll run the sound on our airwaves." And he teased me and laughed and worked it, but I got the questions in, and after that, I mean, I just said, I can't be overwhelmed. I got to do the job. I thought, well, then you just interviewed the greatest. So you should be able to interview anybody else, no matter what the situation. Little did I know it all these years and decades later that I would have the current moments like you just talked about, and some of the best through history. I mean, really fortunate, whether it was Tyson, Ali, whether it was John Elway, Joe Montana, Wayne Gretzky, I mean, Brett Hull. I just, you can go on and on about the people in different environments that I've been really blessed to interview. Some are quick post game or pre-game. Some were a sit down when I was doing the up close interview show or the CMI Chris Myers interview. Kind of like this format didn't exist at those times, but it's a great experience. So I know it's a long winded answer. So that's still. I appreciate the moment, but boy, I don't stop to, when the light goes on, that stuff has to leave me. So, I mean, a little bit of that leaks in the excitement of the moment, but you got to do the job at this point.
Chris, can you remember when you interviewed Muhammad Ali? Like, how vivid is it for you still?
Still very vivid for a teenager that had a notepad and wrote questions. Of course, you're going to get a few shots because of the room. It was a smoky room at the Fountain Blue Hotel in Miami Beach. If anybody's been down there, he was training for a fight, and I knew he was the greatest, and I boxed, all that, but I didn't realize in the moment, and then looking back on it, the magnitude of that kind of person in that moment. So people would ask questions, and I had to kind of wedge in with the large tape recorder, the old cassette. They were a picture. It was like something out of a black and white movie. Guys with visors, smoking cigars. Sports writers that had been at a. And I was here, this high school kid in the '70s, late '70s, and they were looking at me like, he should be parking our cars. So when I got in there and asked Ali, and I think I asked him something about the opponent matchup. It wasn't a real technical question. It was just something to kind of get, you got to see where you fit in. And he went looked at me. I had long hair, and he was like, hey, you're not as dumb as you look, kid, or something like that. And everybody's laughing, and then he had the room, and then he answered the question, and I had one more, and I could tell the other guys were like, "Come on, we need to ask." And then he was just like, "Don't be a fool, stay in school." It was one of those that later you hear wrestlers using. But that's what stood out about the interview, the actual content. I can't recall exactly, but they were happy with it. They used the sound bites on the radio station, and it helped me eventually get hired there before I got through college, and helped pay my way through college so that I could get into television eventually.
Did you ever interview him again?
I did not. I've been around him at press conferences at ESPN and a few other places, the
Well,
Olympics, and things like that. He
wow.
had later stages because I didn't cover a lot of boxing locally, and then when
Mhm.
I went to ESPN, but there were some moments with the Olympics in Atlanta. I believe the Summer Olympics in Atlanta in the in the mid to late. I think it was '96. Where, by the way, I was at that event when the bomb went off at the time, and of course they had to clear it. They thought there were more bombs, and had to report on that, going there for a sporting event. That's kind of where I hit it off with Charles Barkley, and we became friends. Another thing, some of those stories you'll hear in the or you'll read it if you in the book if you're interested in that. But yeah, I you usually some guys you connect with and things move on. Other guys you interview early and you end up having, working relationships with people. A guy like Troy Aikman, I interviewed him in the locker room in Dallas when he was the number 1 overall pick, out of UCLA for the Cowboys when Jerry Jones took over
Mhm.
in Dallas, and then years later worked with him at Fox. We've stayed good friends, and now he's on at ESPN on Monday Night Football, doing great. And so that's a relationship like Charles Barkley. We golf. Sometimes we'll hang out and go to dinner when they're in town, vice versa. They've also helped when there's been things personally in our lives, with recommendations. So yeah, that's what's great about the business. That some of it's just straight line work, and other people you connect with beyond that.
Tell me, so you went from Muhammad Ali. Give me the insight. How did you get OJ after that court case? Why did he pick you? I know you're great, but why did he pick you? What was it that he said, or like just give the background and then give how you had to interview him?
Well, I agree with you. It's a good question. Why? And I asked myself that. Why did he pick me? The background was that we were trying to get him on our interview show prior to all of this happening. OJ was this iconic guy, former player, but a media sensation and an entertaining personality. And I had briefly passed him, but never really knew him. But wanted to get him on the show to talk about his job, career, football, etc. So this happens, and then this is late '90s. And then years, trial goes on. It's a trial of the century with a well-known athlete. I mean, a double murder, and then there's the wrongful death lawsuit. And so when both trials are winding down, our guest booker gets credit for the show. We coordinate with guests when they could come on, when we could tape. Said, "Hey, OJ's willing to come on the show with you." And I was like, "Wow, it's a few years later, but okay." And I said, "Okay, we got to run this by the bosses. What are he said there were conditions, and I usually, when guys would come on the show, I
Mhm.
was respectful. Remember, I'm doing a sports show, but I would ask guys about some difficult things, but I would never ambush anybody. It's like inviting somebody into your home. You don't mistreat them, even if something awkward happens. So I was always careful about that, but you got to cover the story and ask questions that fans, people watching, want to know about. If you're respectful, and if anybody ever said, 'Hey, there's this or this,' I wouldn't badger him, but at least we would try to address it. So I didn't have really conditions. I sometimes would tell people, if you're interested in what I'm going to ask you, here's some topics, but nothing was specific. So anyway, his two conditions, and I thought they were fair. He called, he had his lawyer on the phone with our bosses and our producer and myself, and he didn't say much. But it's like, I'll do it, but the two things: it has to be done live, which we had not done that show up close, right? Roy Firestone did it before me; it was a taped show. I said, we can do that. Our
Mhm.
bosses said we can do that. And then the other one was I couldn't really ask about his children in this, and they were young at the time. And I thought, later there's some theories about involvement from his son, but I thought that was fair, being a father myself, and so we agreed to
Mhm.
that. And then it was the first live interview. He said he turned down Barbara Walters because she would only tape it, and he was worried that with taped interviews, that they would edit things and make him look guilty, or more, yeah, more
Oh.
guilty than we thought. That was his view. So anyway, we set it up. We did it. It was supposed to be live. He showed up. I give him credit for that. Supposed to be a half-hour show. It was so. I mean, the ratings were through the roof. It got national attention. I mean, Howard Stern talked about it the next day. Jay Leno on the Tonight Show. I mean, national ratings. Just not only about what he said, but how he looked and the fact that he did it. First live interview since both trials, and that's important. The wrongful death, which again, that one he was found liable and having to pay money to the Goldman family or those relatives of those that were deceased. So yeah, it was a
Mhm.
very different kind of interview out of the box. I mean, I prepared like I would a sporting event, except I had to talk to lawyers, I had to talk to detectives. I had a short amount of time really to prepare for it. It got so bad that at home I would say, somebody would say, pass the salt at dinner. And I would say, I object. And they're like, Chris, relax. You're not on, you're not doing the interview yet. It really consumed me. And we ended up going like, you can watch it on YouTube now. And it's really interesting because movies have been made and other things and other interviews. And OJ's, passed away, but you can see at the time, put it in context for the late 90s after all that. And I think things add up. I tried to get to most of the questions, and some people said I shouldn't do it. In fact, I mentioned this that
Oh, wow.
an attorney who defended him, who I ran into at some event, said, "Hey, I wouldn't do this." And I said, "Why not? You defend him." He said, Anything attached with him is just negative. You're going to get," and I had some athletes, people who would normally come on the show who were like, we don't think you should, we don't want to come on if OJ's going to be on, whatever. That was their choice. But I had to do it because I thought, and actually Bill Murray gave me good advice about it. It's what people I wanted to ask questions that we would have asked had he taken the stand in the trial and let people
Mhm.
judge. It was a different time where I'm not going to be in his face like, and I thought he was absolutely guilty. In fact, studying everything I did, I had some access to things that the jury didn't see, but there was no way that he didn't do it or didn't do it with some help or involvement and would cover up whatever. But I was more convinced. I tried to go in open minded. But I didn't want to come off like I was the judge and the jury. I just wanted to ask the questions that I think people, and to his credit, I mean, he answered, he spun some things, he did some things that, you can go back and see on that. But I was glad that I did it, even though it was a sports star, not really a sports interview, but it was a moment that I was proud that we were able, and I had support with the crew and preparing for that, to get that done.
How did it seem? How did he seem? Sorry.
Yeah, he seemed maybe medicated. Usually I'll go in and welcome
Oh.
a guest or talk to them before I just said, "Thanks for doing this." The ending of the interview, I always shake the guest's hand and thank them for being on. The only guest in years of doing that, that I didn't shake his hand. I just said, "I appreciate you said you'd be here and you did, and I appreciate you answering or at least, responding to the questions." There was a moment, this is telling to me too. There was a moment after the first segment, and we're live, 2 moments actually,
Mhm.
where I was just showing him pictures of his wife, getting, his domestic violence before, that some people think may have led to the actual killing before a break. And he was like, "Oh, well, he said, well, those were pictures, Polaroids taken at 2 in the morning. You wouldn't look so good either. Your wife wouldn't if that happened." And I'm like, boy, he seemed out of touch, a little detached, almost like he was. And then we hit the break, and he turns to me, and we are just talking about her domestic violence and death, and he says,
Mhm.
"Hey, we have a tea time. I have a tea time with some guys for some golf out at Riviera Country Club, coming up next week as an opening. If you want to join, there's 3 of them." And I was like, I was like, "What the hell?" That's how. And then his PR representative, a woman, came out of the green room area, and she's yelling. This is in that 2-minute break. Remember, we're live. And,
Yeah.
she's, like, yelling, "You can't ask these questions, you shouldn't be." And I said, I said, Look, we can't be talking about, football here. The reason initially it was different, things have changed, so I gotta ask these questions.
Right.
I'm not gonna sit here." And he said, this is what was telling too. He said to her, "Oh, go back in there, I can handle this. This is no problem." So those were a couple of things that I think when you ask, I'm trying to
Wow.
give you a sense of what it was like that maybe you
Mhm.
didn't see when you watched the interview.
Oh,
You alright?
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you were saying that he's got it, and that was the sense of the room, and he was out of touch, and so you've been asked about that many of times. Um, what like did it kind of put you on the map or like worldwide map? How about that?
I would say, yeah, and for all the people that doubt it, I was proud that we ended up doing it. I say we because the company
Mhm.
had to back me, the guys on the show, and he had to show up. It just showed, and I think people wrote afterwards, and look, I leave that up to other people. Some people thought I could have been, more harsh. Some people thought I was too harsh. But the overriding reviews, if you want to call them back by writers, and even those that's like on radio talk shows, entertainment, whatever, it certainly brought more media than just sports media into my world,
Right.
and I think they respected that, and I think it was a positive thing for sports broadcasters who can also be journalists or serious interviewers. I mean, there's a reason I went into sports because the fun in games and the winning and the losing and the competition, but also people and finding out how they handle adversity and what they do. And so this was an out of the box kind of interview. So yes, in that sense, and I had people say you'll always be remembered as the guy who interviewed OJ. And again, that was a different point in my career before I ever went on to Fox to cover the World Series when the Red Sox ended their streak, when the White Sox finally won a World Series, to be the field reporter and be on a network broadcast for that. The Phillies, some of those Cardinals, some of those great moments covering the Blue Jays back in the day, and it was nice to see him back in a World Series recently. Yeah, and then Super Bowls. I mean, I not only mentioned the Tom Brady, but I covered some other Super Bowls, 5 or 6 actually for Fox, and so those were sports interviews that people respected the work I did. But that yes, if that
Mhm.
in the eyes of many, it was like whoa. But that's how I looked at it. I thought it was very different. It was a little bit of a risk, but absolutely worth it all. And I think good. I think a lot of times people think, oh, a sports guy can't be serious, or sports guys, and it wasn't political. I mean, this was, and obviously I wouldn't be doing
Yeah.
this if the guy wasn't a Heisman Trophy winner and an outstanding running back in his day in pro football and in the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. And then he was still very obviously popular on television with his car commercials and broadcasting. So it was a sports story that went way off the rails. But I had questions in watching the trial and things like that, thinking, boy, this is, can this really be happening? And it did.
Wow. So the NFL is what, 5 weeks away?
We're
How
close.
excited are you for the are you how excited are for you for the NFL season? And which teams are going to surprise in your opinion? Because there always is a handful.
Yeah, last year, right? 3 teams that were last in their division went from worst to first, Patriots being a great example. There were 6 teams that missed the playoffs the year before that made the playoffs last year, so there'll be some new teams shuffling in and some other teams shuffling out. I think the Saints I'll talk about teams that'll be improved. Saints in a division, I think Tampa Bay will probably win that division. Carolina won it last year, and the record wasn't
Mhm.
impressive, but they won it. I think the Saints will challenge for that with Tampa Bay, so they'll be the rising team. Their quarterback, Tyler Shuck, pronounced not like it's spelled, but he only played 9 games second half, but boy, he showed a lot, and not just on tape, how he handled some difficult situations. So watch the Saints. The Tennessee Titans could be kind of a sleeper team. They're in a tough division. They have the former head coach of the Jets, but the former defensive coordinator in Robert Salah of the 49ers, who I think they'll have a good defense. And they have Cam Ward, second year for the number 1 overall pick, the quarterback from the University of Miami. So those are some teams that I think the Super Bowl champ will have a hard time getting back. Seattle Seahawks having lost their coordinators on offense and defense and their star running back. The Rams seem like
Mhm.
like a favorite. I know you asked about teams that would be rising. So it'd be hard for teams in that division to rise up. Maybe the Chargers, it wouldn't be a surprise if they made the playoffs because they've been there. But the Chargers
Mhm.
could make a Super Bowl run, kind of like where Denver was last year. Had Denver had their quarterback healthy, they would have, in my view, beaten New England and gone on to the Super Bowl. We might have had a more competitive Super Bowl game. But yeah, there's some interesting spots. I think the Cowboys could challenge for the division with the Eagles. The Eagles have much more talent, a better defense, but Dak Prescott, maybe as good as his numbers are, maybe he does something special this year. So that's kind of a wide scope, without having been able to dive
Mhm.
into some preseason games yet or look at some
Chris,
training
you've been
camp.
to
Mm,
Chris,
yeah,
have you been to every NFL stadium?
I have. Yeah, I think the last one that I hit was the Raiders in Vegas, which was relatively new. I know we have some others that are being rebuilt in Tennessee. And in fact, that'll be our first game on Fox, where the number 1 pick, Fernando Mendoza from Indiana, will will be. I don't know if he's going to start. Looks like Kirk Cousins might, but that'll be my opening game, and the
Hmm.
Raiders will host the Dolphins, 2 franchises that were once so great in the old AFL and AFC and that have some work to do building up, but I've been to every, yes, I would say every NFL stadium, and they're all
So which
the newer ones
one?
are outstanding. What's that? Sorry?
Sorry, I interrupted you, but which one is the loudest for you?
For me, and whether I was on the field for a playoff game or in the booth, it's no question the Seattle, where the Seahawks play, and, that's my favorite place to go because even when they aren't winning, the weather, the crowd, the opposition reacting to that, it's really exciting. Kansas City, as far as outdoor stadiums, goes 2nd on the list. There's some dome
Hmm.
stadiums. New Orleans, to me, was always the loudest. Minnesota has come close after that. But those are the ones that I have been in playoff games as well as regular season games, and I have no hesitation in saying that that's where the volume was so out of control. And I've had the other extreme where, and I'm sure folks in Canada can relate to this, and I grew up in South Florida and living out west of California at Fox headquarters, so cold weather I didn't grow up in, even though I worked at ESPN in Connecticut for a while, but I covered some 20 below games in Green Bay. You know, you pour the hot coffee in a cup, but it freezes before the second quarter. You get so cold, your fingers, you can't write notes. Everything, you have all kinds of gear on that's hard to do your job on the sideline reporting. It's one thing to be in a warm booth for games like that. But I've been at a few of those that have been the other extreme of not loud, but so cold that did get in the way of us trying to do our job. But I love outdoor weather games, just as a football fan, always have, and natural grass fields as well, and always will.
What was bigger to you, being on the field when New England came back against Atlanta, or like you mentioned before, when the Red Sox won and broke the curse? You were on the field for both. Which one to you was bigger?
Yeah, the Red Sox was amazing because of the comeback against the Yankees, and they really, it was an interesting team with Manny Ramirez, and there was the Kurt Schilling and the bloody sock. Going back historically, but I think my initial and sport, my passion, and I love them all as we've talked about, is football and the NFL. And to me, there's nothing like a Super Bowl. And having been on that sideline throughout the game and watching the magic of Brady not panicking, being a little, if he needed to be, outspoken with some teammates, but the confidence of that team in Atlanta was very good. I'm still somewhat shocked that it took a little bit of them not doing their job, but the Patriots being patient enough and confident enough to do their job to come back from 28-3. So that's the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, and then overtime, the only one at the
Mhm.
time, the first one, I should say. And then for Brady, who that year had been through some things. His mom had been ill. There was the Deflategate thing, and then for him, to lead that comeback with, again, there was a team effort, and then to get to him, I guess that was part of it. I remember, I think it was Johnny Damon was the first Red Sox player I got to when they won, and the crowd going crazy. You don't want to get in the way of people's celebration, but with Brady, our producer, when that Super Bowl ended, and you have the biggest audience there ever is with television in terms of Super Bowls, he's saying, get to Tom and talk to him while we're live. We want to get him on his, and the crowd. It was after regulation, so other media was there and camera crews. My cameraman got knocked down. I had a security guy. He got lost in the shuffle. I got hit in the back of the head with somebody else's camera, and I saw him embrace with Belichick, and I was trying to get in there, and the producer said, "We'll use an overhead shot." You could watch that, how I'm kind of working through like salmon going upstream to get to him. And Tom, I could tell he was exhausted because the play had just happened in overtime to win on the running play. And when I said, hey, Tom, you have a minute after the embrace from, and he was like, I'm so tired. But the producer said, go. And I just said, we're live with Tom Brady. So he quickly had to kind of cooperate, and he was a perfect gentleman and handled the interview well. And the irony now is, of course, he's a team member at Fox in broadcasting. But I would say those are close. I know that's a good question because there's so many other moments in baseball postseason. I mean, I was there when the Yankees when the Red Sox came back against the Yankees and Ortiz had the hit and Dave
Mhm.
Roberts scored, and I was in that Fenway Park, camera well waiting to interview the Yankees, who we thought were going to go on and win the comeback from that deficit. But that's the one that jumps out to me. A lot of great football moments, just so many great sports moments that again you can prepare and do your job, but you don't know where you're going to end up and what's going to happen when you're there. You just have to do the best you can
Mhm.
when you are in those situations.
Chris, before I let you go, tell me an interview you did and the player wasn't too happy. How did you handle it?
Well, that's a good. I had a few where people didn't want to talk about something, so I usually would move on. I'm trying to think.
Mhm.
Most people, I think if you treat them with respect, even if they don't want to talk about it, they'll.
Mhm.
And I've had a few say, "Well, I'd rather not. I'd rather not talk about that." And I would just, okay, it's my job to ask the question, or if I felt people were wondering, we can move on and go to the next thing. But I don't think I've ever had anybody. Well, here you go. This one, and this is probably the obvious one, but it ended well. I won't take too much time, but we're interviewing Mike Tyson after he got out of prison, right? He's his first fight before his comeback from going to jail for that brief time. We go to his house in Las Vegas. We set up outside the cameras. He's sitting across from me. He's got his sparring partner, but our producer, the cameras are there. I'm showing him in the interview Sports Illustrated covers of his career. At this age, you win the title.
Mhm.
This happened here, and he's answering. And then I show him the picture of the biting of Evander Holyfield's ear, that incident, right? And as soon as I mention that, uh, he freaks out and says, he calls me a name, I'll just say a curse word. You're trying to provoke me. The anger from him, you're spitting like a rabid dog, and he starts to lunge towards me. And I mean, I'm white. I turned more white at that moment, thinking this is it. I didn't know. I was like, maybe I can jump in the pool and swim away, but I couldn't react that fast. But thankfully, our producer stepped forward, so he hesitated. His bodyguard, or one of the bodyguards, and then they kind of hooked him and got him on each side. But he got this close to my face, calling me names about why would you ask that? Bring that up. That's embarrassing. Whatever he was, I don't remember hearing too much, except I knew he was angry. So they calm him down. They sit him back in the chair. I'm trying to catch my
Mhm.
breath. I mean, it's Tyson who could destroy me, on a bad day with one hand. Uh, yeah, and I don't even know if I could outrun him. I probably could. Anyway, so I'm like, okay. And the cameras are still rolling. So I'm like, Mike, if you don't want to answer the question, just tell me. And he just looks at me, the steam, and I'm like, so, maybe we'll wrap this up. We got, and the interview was not, I was like, well, we should get out. I don't, I need any more trouble. So I said, "Well, we'll leave, we'll go, and I appreciate your time." And then he's like, "No, no, no, we should finish. You stay, finish the interview." I'm like, "You sure?" And he's like, "Yeah, all right." So I kind of moved off that, but I just had to say, well, obviously, I took a risk here. Something to the effect of, obviously, that moment you're not comfortable with, that makes you angry. And he kind of addressed it and then moved on. So then we finished the interview. I just was asking a few more, and I had more, but I was like, we're getting out of here. So I said, we're going to wrap it up
Mhm.
now. He goes, "Hey, you know what? Let me show you around the house a little bit, before you go." It's like, it's a Vegas estate, very fancy statues. I was like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, are we really the crew?" He's like, they'll wait for you. So I was like, okay, okay. So, well, along with one of his guys, he wanders, he shows me over here's this weight room, and up here's the movie room. And, you want a bottle of water? He takes me through the kitchen. Thank you. Of course, I took it. And we left. But the two things that stood out in the interview, number one, his management didn't want that video shown. It was out of my control because they said that part of the interview. But the two things that he did reveal in
Okay.
the interview that I thought were important is number one, that happiness. He didn't really know what that were. He couldn't identify with what happiness was. And the only two places that he felt the most comfortable in the world. And this is kind of sad. And later, we saw some things psychologically that he's admitted to that have affected him, along with boxing or whatever else has happened in his life. But the only two places he felt most comfortable were in jail, in prison, and in the ring. And that kind of, not that you ever understand always why people get upset about
Mhm.
things, but that helped me understand him and his life a little bit better. So that's probably the worst anything ever ever got. Usually guys will walk away or say, "I don't wanna talk about that," and we move on.
Mike, you you had Tyson after you. You gotta relax.
I just yes, I just talking about it now when I go back, it was a flash, you hear that expression, "Your life flashes before you." There was a time I mean, this guy's lightning quick with his fists. And I think I don't know if he was trying to intimidate. I don't know that he would have actually hit me or crushed me. But he certainly wanted to let me know that he wasn't happy with that cover of a ear biting, and I was, "Okay, just don't bite my ear," right? That's it.
Thank you so much for that story. Thank you for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. This was just a dream to interview you and have a wonderful NFL season. And hopefully, we can connect in the new year.
Yes, look forward to it. Really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you having me on. You take care.